Dear viewer, welcome to yet another series of our Dokiza TV podcasts. We don't take your time for granted, thank you so much for joining me. Always remember our regular themes are leadership, governance, and education. Our podcast today focuses on Saba Saba, the day Kenyans defied dictatorship and fought for democracy. For Kenyan Gen Z and millennials, they only know Saba Saba by reading and watching stuff about it. Yet it is a day that holds greatest significance in the struggle for second liberation of this country. Imagine waking up in a Kenya where speaking against the government could land you in jail. Where opposition parties were banned, and elections were mere formalities. This was the reality in 1990, a time when brave Kenyans risked everything to demand change. The spark that lit the fire was Saba Saba, Swahili 477, marking the historic protests on July 7, 1990. This was Kenya's turning point, the day pro-democracy activists openly challenged President Daniel Arap Moi's authoritarian regime. The protests were met with brutal force, but they set in motion a wave of resistance that eventually forced the government to allow multi-party democracy. Decades later, Saba Saba remains a powerful symbol of courage, sacrifice, and the relentless fight for freedom. In this podcast, we explore the historical background of Saba Saba, the issues activists fought against, the key figures behind the movement, the repressive tactics used by Moi's government, and the lessons modern Kenyans must learn to safeguard democracy. Here is a short historical background: Kenya under Moi's one-party rule. After independence in 1963, Kenya was ruled by the Kenya African National Union, KANU, under Jomo Kenyatta. When Daniel Arap Moi took over in 1978, he tightened KANU's grip, declaring Kenya an officially one-party state in 1982, few weeks after the attempted August 1, 1982 coup d'état. Henceforth, dissent was crushed, critics were silenced, and corruption thrived. By around 1988, frustration boiled over. The economy was struggling, jobs were scarce, and political oppression was rampant. Moi had even abolished voting by secret ballot and introduced a sham method of voting by queuing behind a candidate. It was dictatorship at the extreme. You could not even mention Moi by name in a bar for fear of special branch and informers that were planted all over, including marketplaces, churches, and university classrooms. The fall of Berlin Wall in 1989 inspired global democratic movements. Kenyans, too, wanted change. Activists planned a mass rally on July 7, 1990, at Nairobi's Kamukunji grounds to demand multi-party democracy. The government responded with force, but the message was clear: Kenyans would no longer stay silent. So, what were Kenyans fighting for? The Saba Saba protests were not just about politics, they were about basic human rights and dignity. Key demands included: number 1, end of one-party rule. KANU monopolized power, making elections meaningless. Activists wanted competitive politics. Number 2, freedom of speech and assembly. The regime banned opposition gatherings and controlled the media. Number 3, stop torture and extrajudicial killings. Dissenters were detained without trial, tortured, or disappeared. Number 4, economic reforms. Corruption and mismanagement left millions in poverty despite Kenya's potential. Number 5, independent judiciary. Courts served the executive, not justice. These were not radical demands, they were the bare minimum for a free society. Key figures in the Saba Saba movement. The struggle was led by fearless activists, politicians, clergy, lawyers, and ordinary citizens who risked everything. Some notable figures include Kenneth Matiba and CharlesRubia. These former KANU ministers shocked the nation when they publicly called for multi-party democracy in 1990. Their arrest before Saba Saba only fueled public anger. Jaramogi Oginga Odinga. A veteran opposition leader, Odinga had long resisted KANU's dictatorship. His fiery speeches inspired many young activists. Raila Odinga and James Orengo. Young firebrands like Raila and Orengo mobilized university students and trade unions. Orengo, a lawyer, defended activists in court despite government intimidation. Wangari Maathai. The Nobel laureate and environmentalist was also a fierce democracy advocate. She linked environmental justice to political freedom, facing arrests for her activism. The clergy too were actively involved. Bishop Muge, Dingi Mwana Ainziki, Cardinal Otunga, Reverend Joya. These religious leaders courageously condemned injustice. Bishop Alexander Kipsang Muge was killed in a suspicious car crash after defying Mwa. Bishop Ndingi Mwana Ainziki and Cardinal Maurice Otunga stood firm against repression. Lawyers too were visible in the struggle: Gibson Kamaukuria, Martha Karua, Uki Ambaka, Wiley Matunga. Human rights lawyers like Gibson Kamaukuria, who fled after torture, and Martha Karua fought for detainees in court. Uki Ambaka and MP Martin Shikuku, the People's Watchman, were vocal critics of KANU's excesses. University students and journalists. Students from University of Nairobi and Kenyatta University joined protests, facing violent crackdowns. Journalists like Jidabua Manyara, who was founder and editor of the Nairobi Law Monthly magazine, exposed regime atrocities. These leaders faced arrests, torture, and exile, but they refused to back down. And this is how Mwa's government suppressed the protests. The regime used brutal tactics to crush dissent. Number 1, violent crackdowns. Police shot protesters, arrested thousands, and raided homes. Number 2, detentions without trial, whereby activists like Matiba were jailed for months without charges. Number 3, targeted assassinations. Suspicious deaths, like Bishop Muge's and many others such as Karimi Nduthu, instilled fear. Number 4, media blackouts. State-controlled media ignored protests, spreading propaganda instead. Tactic number 5, divide and rule tactics. The government stoked ethnic divisions to weaken opposition unity. Despite this, the protests grew. International pressure mounted, and by 1991, Mwa reluctantly allowed multi-party politics. So, what lessons from Saba Saba for today's Kenya? Saba Saba was a victory, but democracy remains fragile. Here's what we must remember: we need to always remember that freedom is never free. Rights we enjoy today were won through blood and sacrifice. We must also remember that vigilance is key. Corruption, police brutality, and election fraud still threaten democracy. We also need to value unity over tribalism. The oppressive KANU regime survived by dividing Kenyans. We must resist this trap. Another great lesson: youth must lead. The protesters of 1990 were young. Today's youth must protect their future. What else do we need to bear in mind? Speak up before it's too late. Complacency allows tyranny to return silently. By way of conclusion, here is why every Kenyan must defend democracy. Saba Saba was more than a protest, it was a revolution of the mind. It proved that no dictatorship lasts forever when people stand together. Today, Kenya faces new challenges: extrajudicial killings, corruption, inequality, abductions, land grabbing, and political apathy. But the spirit of Saba Saba reminds us that change is possible when citizens demand it. As we mark July 7th, let's honor the heroes who fought for our freedom, from Kenneth Matiba to Matai, Bishop Muge to Martha Karua, Jem Wakalu to James Orengo, and so many others. As patriotic Kenyans, we must hold leaders accountable, vote wisely, and defend justice. Democracy is not a spectator sport, it requires all of us to play our part. The question is, will you? May you have a free and meaningful Saba Saba day.